this president, his response to everything is we need to raise taxes.
I mean, this is like an ESPN moment. Come on, man. I mean, the lies from the Romney camp just continue. Romney senior advisor Ed Gillespie, there he is out there again. He wants you to believe that the president of the United States is a classic tax and spend liberal. But the facts tell a different story. Taxes are at a 30-year low. This chart with figures from the Congressional Budget Office show that taxes are lower now than they were under the 4 previous presidents. Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. Now, I want you to like us on Facebook by going to facebook.com/EdShow. And Susan Del Percio, I want you to send this chart to all of your conservative friends. I'm not picking on you. I'm asking you to do me a favor. Send this chart to all of your conservative friends out there that thinks President Obama has raised taxes. I'll tell you what, I give the conservatives credit because they won't give up on telling this to the American people. They're pretty dogmatic about it. Let's bring in the Grio's Joy Reid, former Pennsylvania governor, and NBC News analyst Ed Rendell, and Republican strategist Susan Del Percio. I wasn't picking on you. You know that.
No, I'm sorry.
But it is true. Why do the Republicans keep saying that?
Well, are you saying that facts and politics are supposed to go together?
Kinda.
That doesn't happen in politics. No, and it's the messaging that they're using is, in fact, when you look at, and we can get into a big debate about this, the health care ruling, it is deemed a tax. There are issues there. And the solutions, which Republicans are saying absolutely raising no taxes, and the Democrats are saying, well, we're not going to cut spending. Well, that's how you get into these situations. And frankly, the word compromise has become a dirty word. And we have to go back to something like Simpson Bowles. And the Republicans will use things like all the Democrats want to do is tax. And the Democrats are going to call Republicans evil.
Well, I mean, the problem is, first of all, technically, the Affordable Care Act the mandate is constitutional under the taxing authority. It's really not a tax; it's a penalty. We could get into a whole argument about that.
Well, 55% of people do think it's tax.
Well, I mean, the problem is for Republicans this time in trying to use a tax argument is that every poll shows that the majority of Americans agree with Barack Obama's prescription on taxes, meaning wealthier Americans should pay more. So they've already lost the tax argument. So trying to go back to this sort of 90s 80s strategy of tax and spend liberals, it isn't going to work because that's not where Americans are right now.
Ed?
I'm not so sure that Joy's right. I think that because they lie consistently and they say it over and over again, I think it has a tendency to take hold. Susan didn't lie, and she did an artful job of answering your question, but she forgot to mention that the tax that the Supreme Court said was a tax affects less than 1% of Americans, and only they get taxed if they don't sign up for health care. It's a minute little tax that has no implications for people who already have health care.
So then it's good that the president only wants it.
But Ed, second, it's not that he hasn't raised taxes, Ed. He has cut taxes on the average American family by $3,600. You
never hear that listed to the Republicans.
2 tax cuts in the stimulus, the making work pay cut, and the payroll deduction tax cut. If you're an average working family that makes $75,000 under Barack Obama, your federal taxes have gone down $3,600. How dare they say he's a tax?
If you can get a job right now, and that's the bigger problem.
But that's not the issue.
The economy.
That's not what your guys are saying.
Taxes are not what people are principally voting on in this election. Taxes, if you go through and you ask people, what are the most important issues in the economy? It isn't government spending. It isn't taxes. It's jobs in the economy, which, by the way, Mitt Romney's not even talking about
when
because
the
he's so busy defending himself on Bain.
Saying that he wants to seek a tax increase on those making $250,000 or more.
It's
Hold on.
ending
when that
a tax
happens,
cut.
Everybody, politically across the board, liberals to conservatives and everyone in between, said that is a complete political act. And guess what? I agree with that. The president thinks that and the president's team thinks that that's the way to win this election.
Well, the law's going to sunset at the end of the year, so he's trying to extend it for 98% of Americans.
And he just happened to do it right now. This is the way. I mean,
he's been trying to do it for 3 years.
But the point is that it was very political. So he's brought this
to expire. Republicans could come to the table. Wait a minute. Republicans could come to the table, and everyone agrees, right, that the Bush tax cuts for people who make less than $250,000 a year should be extended. Everyone everyone agrees on that. So why don't Republicans just agree to that? They won't, because
every time they go in and give in a little bit, they end up not following through on the end result.
Didn't the president and the Democrats give the Republicans what they wanted in the lame duck session of the Congress when they did a 2-year extension of the Bush tax cuts?
Sure.
So obviously it's going to be another issue. So why not agree on extending it right now?
So shouldn't the president own those tax cuts by now and say, instead of saying the Bush tax cuts, those are his, and that he should take more responsibility?
He's willing to take responsibility for it because he is willing to go with the majority of Americans who want the taxes raised on the top 2%.
But they always go back to saying it's the Bush tax cuts as if that's something bad, so he can always go back and blame his predecessor.
But Susan, can I ask you a question? Because here's the thing. What is the proactive justification of Republicans giving people who make millions and millions of dollars a year an additional tax cut? We're talking about trillions of dollars of waste. If you want to talk about cutting government spending, why are we spending trillions of dollars to give tax cuts to about 400,000 families?
Here's the biggest problems that people have who make a lot of money. And by the way, we're talking about over $250,000 here in New York. That's a policeman and a nurse with overtime. We're not talking a lot of money for those folks at $250,000. Besides, and there are other Democrat senators who happen to agree that number is too low. But here's the biggest problem. If you went to the wealthiest Americans and say, I am going to use your tax dollars for this, not for just throwing it in the general fund, but for specific things, people would be more likely to do it. The fact is that when you see government waste, when you see the stuff that happened at General Services, when you see those,
it's never worked like that, Susan. It's never worked like that, and it's never going to work like that.
And let's be clear: the president wants to use that money to reduce the deficit. It will reduce the deficit by $863 billion.
He offered big cuts, and the Republicans walked from it.
But I think the most important thing, Ed, to realize is that even on this issue, the Republicans continue to mislead the American people. First of all, it's not a tax cut on someone who earns $260,000. They don't increase taxes on their $260,000 of income. It's only on the income over $250,000. So that couple who makes $260,000 only pays an increase in taxes on $10,000.
On $10,000, that's right. The first $250,000 is going to stay the same.
That's $350 that I guarantee you a family in New York City, like I said, who have limited means, because that's all it is when you're living in.
What does the country want, though? The country wants low taxes. The president's trying to deliver it to them. He's also trying to deliver the populist view that the top 2% need to do a little bit more. Go back to the old rates. It's not as if we haven't been there before.
Listen, if they were sincere, they would have opened Simpson Bowls. He had a commission. He threw it on. He put it in.
But he tried to do it.
No, he didn't. No, the Democrats put him in a situation he could not do it.
Joy Reid, Ed Rendell, and Susan Del Percio. Great panel. Great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much. Coming up, a Maryland newspaper says the Ed Show isn't a great place to reach independent voters. Oh, am I going to set them straight after this? Stay with us.